Yo, what's going on, guys? Reversal here, and today I'm going to be going over the changes on the ban list and what I think is going to happen as a result of it. If you saw my prediction video, most of the things they did, I wanted them to do, and I'm surprised they actually did it. I was surprised by a couple things, but we'll go over that when we get there. So yeah, I'm just going to go down the list, kind of talk about all the changes. Starting off with the bans. They banned Scythe, Statue, Kick Close, and Sprite Elf. So I wanted them to ban these three, they did. So props to them for that. Scythe, like I said before, is not something that's like super prevalent right now, but this is a card that just, it always seems to come back. And just it being gone is great for the game. Same thing with Stormwind. It was good right now. In Flu, Cash can use it technically. Whether they will or not, no one knows because they can't now. So yeah, this type of cards just don't belong in the game. And then Kick Close. It was either ban Instant Fusion or ban this. And I'm glad they decided to just ban this instead. Tier can still use King of the Swamp to kind of like copy this so they can make the other fusions. And they still have ways to fuse, but the deck's like definitely gonna be a lot worse with the hits that happen. And then finally, this is the ban that really surprised me, the Elf. Like, this card is definitely ban worthy, in my opinion. I won't deny that, but I think this wasn't a sprite hit, in my opinion. Like, it's a sprite hit, obviously, but I don't think it was banned because of sprite. I think it was banned because of tier and a whole bunch of other decks that use this card just because it's so generically good. Like, it's just an extender in any deck that makes any form of a 2. Like, this getting banned hurts dinos a lot, which I'm a little sad about, but you know, it is what it is. Yeah, I thought hitting starter would be the sprite hit, but yeah, they just collateral damage, so they don't need to hit anything else because this basically kills sprite as far as I'm concerned. I was trying to look at a lot of stuff yesterday to make it work because I still have my sprite stuff. Unfortunately, I was too lazy to sell it, but yeah, the deck just seems a lot worse without Elf. There's a lot of the combos that are like kind of weird. Like, you can still make sprint boards and like the boards are like decent, but you lose your follow-up a lot. It's like the deck loses its grind game. I don't know. You can still make Toad with the Bujinki link, but it's like you can't bring it back off Elf. You have to have a way to double cross to be able to double Toad. It's just kind of awkward. It's still probably like okay, since like the Toad can get you a beaver for follow-up at least, so you got that going for you. But I don't know. I'm not too sure about the Gishki sprite. I don't know how reliant that is on Elf. I haven't really looked into it too much because I think the engine was too big personally. I wasn't a fan of how the deck list had to look. And then there's Runic Sprite, which I talked about in my last video. I wanted them to like limit tip or something, and they didn't. So maybe Runic Sprite will be a thing again because the shufflers got limited. Spoiler alert. But yeah, I'm not sure what Sprite's gonna look like going forward, but I think without Elf, it's really not looking too great. Now for the limits. This is where all the fun happened. I don't have the Ishizu cards, but I got this guy. This is going to represent all of them. All the Ishizu cards went to 1. It's another one that I said I wanted to happen. And I'm glad they decided to limit all them. Like, I didn't think they were going to ban them, even though like these cards just shouldn't exist, but having them at 1 is like whatever. It's better than trying to split it up or just go like limit 2 different ones or whatever, just hit them all. Yeah, these cards are just so like oppressive to a lot of decks, especially the shufflers. They're just crazy. I'm really glad they limited them. I think that'll make the format a lot less miserable in itself. And then I think this surprised a lot of people, including myself, because I thought I had Havness going to 1, but I had the Field Spell going to 1, but that was the one I wasn't really sure about because, you know, it's an expensive card, and they don't really like banning expensive cards if they don't have to, so they decided to limit Havness, Merrily, and Sharon. Which, I mean, honestly, I'm fine with them doing that instead of, like, the 2 extra names getting limited hurts way more, I think, than the Planet going to 1, so I'm happy with that. Even though these cards are all at 1, it's still, like, relatively accessible. Just because, like, they could still make Beatrice, they could still make Sprint. So, like, it's not like they can't just get to their fusions anymore. So, I mean, this stuff hurts the consistency of the deck a lot. It gets more fragile. I don't think it'll be like a top deck anymore, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's still better than a lot of decks after all these hits. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Tier's still like playable to some degree and still like capable of beating other decks. It's just probably going to be more luck reliant now, and depends how the format shapes up as far as hand traps go. But yeah, I think these hits were really good. I think they went about hitting the Tier deck just as well as anyone could have hoped, which is nice, because past 2 lists, you know, Snow, they should have never brought it back. They banned it, but that format was miserable. Then they limited Orange Light and banned Curious when no one was using Curious, so that was a great list, did a lot. Not really, but yeah, glad the Tier 0 format's over. Next up is, I don't have this, but the Ancient Fairy Dragon with the errata that's coming out in the set in March, the Maze Memories or whatever it's called. That card with the erratas, I think it still could be good. It's an interesting card, but it'll be cool to see, I guess, come back. I don't think it'll be like anything crazy broken, hopefully. But they did unlimit a card specifically because they brought this card back, which is pretty obvious, but I don't know. I guess we'll have to see how that plays out. But that card, you know, it could be scary, but who knows. That's it for the limits. Then they didn't touch anything on the semi-limit list. And then, I mean, there's a bunch of unlimits. Like I said in the last video, I don't really care too much about this section. Like, when they do stuff like this, it usually doesn't matter. Like Jet Synchron, O-Lion, like, sure, I can't see them being, like, that relevant. Servant of Endymion, I have no idea what those pendulum cards do, I'm not gonna lie to you. And then Yada, who cares? Spiral Resort, I didn't play during Spiral, I hear people hate that deck, but apparently this card to 3 is fine if the Master Plan, I think it's called, it stays banned forever, so it's whatever. But yeah, apparently that deck's really annoying, and I hope I don't have to deal with it ever if it's really that bad. So, then the last 2, the Destrudo. This is the card that's relevant with Ancient Fairy Dragon, because this card can just make 7s really easily. So that could be a thing. It's probably fine at 3, but I don't know. It's a card that's potentially scary to have at 3, I think, maybe. But we'll have to see how it goes, I guess. And then the last card, which a lot of my fellow Dino enjoyers are happy about, is Litho. I'm not happy about this card going to 3, and I'll tell you why. I think this card sucks, and I'm sick of hearing people talk about it. Like, Diagram's a good card, don't get me wrong, but, like, this card isn't very good. Like, I'm not putting 3 of this card in my deck with 1 Diagram, just, like, so you can brick on this guy. Because this guy sucks to draw unless you open very specific hands. So, like, if you don't see babies with it, it's just a minus. Like, you're just throwing cards away. Kashtira is a deck now, so they're going to be ripping cards from the extra deck. Therefore, people will not be playing one of their important extra deck cards anymore. So, the part of this card that was actually good in ripping the extra deck and maybe taking something away that stops them from really like going crazy. That's not even a factor anymore because they're gonna have multiples. So yeah, I don't like this card. I think playing it at 3 is pure copium. I think more diagram would have been good because that's another 2-card combo the deck can have. But this card to 3 doesn't. I'm never playing this card at 3. I don't think ever. I didn't like it at 1, and I don't care for it at 3 because I don't think this card's that good, especially with Kashtira, like I said. But yeah, that's it for the bans, or the whole ban list. So what do I think is gonna happen now? I think they didn't hit Kashtira except for the barrier statue. I guess if you want to call that a hit, but I wouldn't. I think that's probably gonna be the best deck, but I feel like that deck's kind of like not that crazy. The reason I was concerned about it before the ban list was because tier exists, and you can't reasonably deck build for tier and cash because they don't overlap really at all. So now that you can like actually deck build for Kashtira, I don't think it's that scary of a deck. Like, it's obviously still good, and you can lose to like cards like Shifter and a Rise Heart sometimes. If you're a deck that needs the graveyard, and like if you just don't have an out, like that's gonna happen sometimes. But overall, I think the deck is kind of more glass cannon than people let on. People are saying it's gonna be tier 0. I can't imagine that deck's tier 0 in any capacity. It's too easy to tech against for it to be tier 0. Like, the issue with tier limit is like you couldn't really, like, you just had to put a bunch of Bystials and shit in your deck and hope you see them and hope it stops them. But like even a good player, like you could open like 2 hand traps and it just wouldn't do anything. So I mean, that deck was just kind of, it was too resilient. It had too many forms of like disruption. All the cards that are good versus, like, as far as board breakers go, they could just negate with crime, which was another thing in itself. Like, so it was so hard to stop tier. Like, they had way too much stuff going on and not enough counters. But Kashtira, it has plenty. Like, Nibiru is really good against the deck if they don't like side in Ibli and start with that, or if they're not playing the adventure package, which I'm not sure if they will or not, because it's obviously like a 10-card investment in your deck. And you know, they might play it because another card of their week 2 is Book of Eclipse if they don't have Ash. Book of Lunar Eclipse if they don't have a negate, which they don't end on a negate typically unless they're playing the adventure. So I mean, there's a lot more cards that could hit that deck. And then like the Raigeki Dark Hole, it doesn't hit the Shangri era, but it can clear the rest of the board. So it's not the worst. And then I think the steel cards, like Change of Heart, Mind Control, Tactics, I feel like those cards are really good against the deck. Because you could take one of their XYZs and then you could just make your own Arise Heart over it if you happen to be playing one. And then you could just overlay for Zeus after attacking. But you have to play 2 Zeus. Like, that's mandatory because they could just rip one. And Zeus is like the best thing against that deck. You could just clear the whole board easily. Yeah, I think the steel cards will be strong. I think board breakers in general will be pretty good, but I think hand traps will be good as well. Because what I think is probably going to be the second best deck is the branded deck with the Bystial like spell trap engine. I don't think they're going to play like a ton of the hand traps because I don't think maining like a bunch of Bystial hand traps is going to be the move this format. I feel like that's like a small package in the side for other decks might be a thing, but it just kind of depends how the format shapes up. But putting those cards in your main deck when they're not good versus cash is probably not going to be an ideal thing. But that deck will probably play like the Libellions and the Soroniers, since that's like the engine stuff to get the spell traps that they use for disruption, and then like some number of Magnamut. But I guess because the Bystials are kind of gonna have to see how the format develops. Um, Sword Soul, I think Sword Soul is going to be in a decent spot. Like it has counters. It's a relatively fair deck, which is like it's kind of been its problem, especially since Power of the Elements came out. Like it's just the game's kind of like the power levels kind of went a little higher, but I think Sword Soul can still compete. Um, I don't think you can play Desires anymore, unfortunately, because of the cash deck. Like if you banish before dealing with their stuff, like they're just gonna start locking your zones even more and stuff. So Desires might not be able to be played anymore, but it's probably gonna go away from the Bestial version, go back to playing Heavenly Circles, just a bunch of non-engine. So I think Sword Soul's in a pretty decent spot. Flu without Barrier Statue, I can't imagine anyone's playing that deck anymore. Like it's probably still playable, but I mean without the statue, I don't give a shit about that deck. It's not like real in my opinion anymore. Tier, I mean they can still do stuff. I just don't know if it's consistent enough or resilient enough anymore. But like I said, I could easily see that deck still being played. Like once people figure something out, like it's still gonna be a playable deck. Like I'm not convinced it's just dead. I don't think it'll be like top meta anymore, but I think it'll be okay. Like and then other decks like Mac, like stuff that the Bestials and Shufflers hurt before, I feel like those can be like okay, like Drytron, Mac. I could see them being all right. I was never really big on the pure Mac deck personally. I don't think it. Like I played it for a week just for a regional because I needed to play something because I was waiting for my Sprite Core and my Prosperities and stuff to come in. So just picked that deck up, played it, did okay. But I don't know. I feel like that deck's just not like scary. It's okay, but I feel like in a format where Shifter's gonna still exist, it's gonna be rough. And then same thing with Drytron. People are still gonna side the Bestials probably. Some decks will even main them. But Drytron's Drytron. But if you go first and they don't get stopped, they win the game. So I mean, could be decent. This is the Libromancer Mekanko deck. That deck is another one that's just crazy going first. Like you can't lose if you combo with that deck pretty much. But going second, you don't really have a ton of going second card slots. Like you just play like Lava Golems and like hope you see it, I guess. I don't know. I feel like if you lose dice roll game one with that deck, it could be rough, but the deck does make really good boards. But yeah, I'm not sure it'll really take off. And yeah, I don't know if there's any other really decks to talk about. I guess Sprite. Like I said, Sprite. I don't know how it's gonna like. I was trying Tri-Brigade without the elf, and it seemed weird. But I'm really rusty with those the Tri-Sprite combos, so I might have been missing something. But it seemed really weird without the elf. Pure Sprite. You can use the Bujinki link to make Toad still, but Toad with no elf is kind of weird. Like I said, you have to have a way to double cross as well to be able to use Toad twice. But people will probably play that just because like that's the way to get follow up, which the deck really needs a way to have follow up. But I feel like the boards are just overall just a lot worse, and the Sprite boards weren't like crazy to begin with. Like they were good, but I think the main thing was like you had hand traps to back it up, and now your board's just like not as good. So I don't know. I feel like Sprite's gonna not be that great, but the runic version maybe. Like I feel like Elf's good in that version too, but it can probably play without it a little better. But I've never played it because I don't like the runic cards personally. I'm not a fan of using them. So, but yeah, I'm sure Sprite, whether it says an actual deck or an engine, it'll probably find its place somewhere just because the Sprite cards are so good. But I don't know. Let's have to wait and see, I guess. But yeah, that's about it for Banlist. How I think the meta is kind of going to shape up. I guess we'll see how it goes. I'm excited. I think this ban list was good for once. I'm glad they decided to actually like be proactive and just nuke the format like they should have done. So props to Konami for actually caring about their game a little bit. No cafeteria hits is kind of wild, but I mean, I understand it. They want to sell this. They want to sell the deck. I mean, it is what it is. That's what the ban list is used for most of the time, more than anything. But I would have liked to see the Mind Hacker banned at least, because that's kind of what enables the deck to be so bullshit. But they didn't. We'll have to deal with it. It's whatever. They didn't free Misk, but that's coming on the next list for sure. Trust. The new Dino support, they're gonna, he's in the set. They're gonna put him to 2, put him to 3 to help sell that. Speaking of the Dino support, I'm gonna talk about that probably in another video. But yeah, that's about it for the ban list. Meta, shape up, whatever. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe if you want. And peace.